Welcome to Fort Worth 148's podcast, where we meet to discuss Masonic topics and strive to build value in the Brotherhood. The opinions and statements of the participants do not represent any positions or stance of any Grand Lodge or Lodge and are solely the viewpoints of the participants. Welcome back to the podcast, brothers. This is Rhit Moore, past master and current secretary of, Fort Worth 148 and Tarrant 942 now.
Traitor.
This is Grant Gates, current senior warden with Fort Worth 148.
Some promotions.
Yeah.
Right. This is Billy Hamilton, current junior warden with Fort Worth 148.
And this is Gabriel Jagush, senior deacon with Fort Worth 148. And we have a special guest today.
Hello, everybody. I'm Justin Jones. I am a past master of Whitney. I just had a brain fart. 355 and Grandview 266, and I am the Tyler now. They gave me a sword.
All right, cool.
Sweet.
Oh, this past master is angry. Let's give him a weapon to make him even more dangerous. So for our guests today, our subject is Masonic Improvement, and that is both a concept and a blog and a vlog. And our guest is Justin Jones, who is the host and main content provider for Masonic Improvement. So Justin,
that's what caught our attention.
It's nice to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you. So it's kind of funny, though, because I know that in some of your videos you've talked about seeing that interview that Rhit had on Phoenix Masonry. So it's like, hey, we're bringing everyone together now. That's what we'll have to do is have a Phoenix Masonry one where we get everyone from their crew on. But anyway.
Milliken said he would do it.
So we're going to start off with some discussion questions, and one of the discussion questions, I got an Instagram message from one of our listeners, and he asked when we were planning on reintegrating, when we were planning on integrating video as well as audio. So maybe go to like a Google Hangouts format or something like that. And I said, I don't really know when or even if that's going to happen because, it's a couple of us work in conditions where we can't run our air conditioners due to the volume thereof. So sometimes, in dead August, we're recording this podcast,
we're half naked.
Half naked.
Exactly. I don't know if everyone wants to see my...
Neither naked nor clad. Barefoot nor shod. No, definitely not shod. But it's better. I prefer recording in the winter where we just wear sweatshirts and everything like that, and everyone's just freezing to death.
Because we don't have heaters. Because this is Texas, and why we need a heater.
And I think we're going to have to get creative with that because Justin's YouTube's one that kind of made me realize. That's where everybody is. They're watching those while they're at work. They've got them on behind their browser, listening to it, and kind of watching it in the small corner. And we're missing that by being podcast only. But it'll never be video.
So let's play into corporate theft of time. No, I'm kidding. I'm all for it.
Oh, it's happening.
So anyway. But yeah, so when, maybe, if, I don't know, But the question I have is just the one for Billy and Rhit. In Texas, do you have to be a past master to be eligible to become grandmaster? And we were talking about this earlier this week.
Right. Yeah, and so the background to this story really came up because I'm doing a paper right now on one of our past grandmasters, the third grandmaster, which is Samuel May Williams, who was elected. He went to Grand Lodge. He walked in as a junior warden for Harmony Lodge in Galveston, and he walked out as Grand Master. So I was looking through the Texas Grand Lodge law book to see if there's anything in there that talks about that. And the question I had is if you look at Title I, Article 2, Section 1, where it talks about members, it has the Grand Lodge officers, past and present, and that includes Grand Lodge officers, past Grand Lodge officers, and past masters. But then it has a second section that says masters and wardens. And if you look at the verbiage there, it's not necessarily clear. You could look at it to indicate that masters and wardens are also members of the Grand Lodge. Now, the reason this makes, this is important is when you look at Article 3, Section 6, eligibility to office, it says that any member is eligible for any office in the Grand Lodge.
You know what I was thinking too, when we were talking about this the other day, that if he is elected, say Grand Junior Warden or even Grand Master, after his year of that, he's a member of Grand Lodge, whether he's elected a warden again or not. Remember how I said if he didn't get elected senior warden, he can't progress? Because
Right.
Grand Junior Warden, it says in there, is a member of Grand Lodge.
Right. Yep. Grand Lodge officers are
Yeah.
specifically stated as members in Article 2(1)(a).
So that would circumvent being a past master. You would just be a past Grand Lodge officer.
Now, is that past Grand Lodge officer or is that Grand Lodge officer? Because to me, what that sounds like is if you are a junior warden, or let's say you're the warden of a lodge, and you get elected Grand Junior Warden, and you lose the election to Grand Senior Warden, unless you're a warden, next year, let's say you get dropped from your Blue Lodge line, it sounds like you wouldn't be a Grand Lodge officer because the year after that, right? Because you'd be running again for whatever. You wouldn't be an officer in your lodge, or you wouldn't be a warden or a master, and you wouldn't be a Grand Lodge officer. So does it specify past Grand Lodge officers?
Do you have it pulled up?
Here's what. Yeah, I do. So here's what it says under, again, that Article 2, Section 1, subsection A. Grand Lodge officers, the Grand Officers elective and appointive in this Constitution provided during their respective terms of office are listed as members. And then it says past Grand Lodge officers. And so in this case, it only includes the past Grand Masters, past Deputy Grand Masters, and past Grand Wardens.
Okay. But then he
that
would be... That would include... Okay.
Yeah.
So there we go.
So yeah, you would become a member of Grand Lodge without being a past master.
Interesting.
Man, and I'm telling you, Justin, I tore that law book. I love questions like that because it was like, oh, well, just give me a minute, Billy. I'm gonna show you where you're wrong. I could not find it. I'm still looking. Because I've always been told that lodges, wardens, and masters are representatives of basically their lodge who was a member of Grand Lodge. So they're representatives of Grand Lodge.
But as it turns out, that's not the case.
That's how we vote. That's true in voting. There's lodges and members when you vote. But yeah, you can apparently be elected whatever if you're a junior warden, which is crazy.
Billy, we have a job for you.
Right. So actually, and I even looked at, because I know like our Grand Lodge is based on the old Anderson charges, right? From the Anderson Constitution of 1723. And on there, it actually says that, so in order to be a Grand Lodge member, you had to, or in order to be like a Grand Warden, you would have to be a past master. But it says that for Grand Master, you only had to be fellowcraft, which, this was written, as Gabe pointed out to me, this was written before we had the Master Mason's degree. But still, even then, it doesn't make the distinction that you had to be a past master to be Grand Master, even in the old Anderson charges.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the precedent was set because you said he walked third Grand Master walked in as a junior warden?
Yep.
And never was a past master anywhere?
Right. Yeah. He was only made a Mason in New York City in December of 1835. He was elected as Grand Master in December of 1839 here in Texas.
I like his style.
I don't ever want to hear somebody complain about guys being worshipful master in under 5 years again. That's crazy. What a great story that's
I
going
love
to be.
that. That's so crazy. Oh, nowadays I've heard stories of guys being past masters at the age of like 21 or 22 because they'll jump.
Oh, yeah.
They get raised and they jump straight into the officers line as like one of the primary officers.
Yeah, I've seen that several times. Yeah.
So
It's crazy.
I mean, if it works, it works.
Right.
But as we might discuss later on in the podcast, there may be some value to holding him back. But anyways, folks, that's a weird little question that we'd all been kind of wondering about for the past couple of days.
I love that one.
Yeah.
That was a good one.
But so again, our podcast subject today is Masonic Improvement with our guest brother Justin Jones. And so we want to start off with some personal questions for Justin. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself outside of the Masonic lens?
Sure. Well, I was a teacher. I taught physics for about 4 years previously. And I've recently, I guess you can call it promotion. I'm going to become an assistant principal at the high school. So that's
nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So that's
Do
what?
Congrats.
I was going to say,
Oh.
yeah, congrats.
Yeah, congratulations.
I have a son. He is almost 3 years old. His name is Mason. And I
Oh,
have
that's my brother's name. That's a good one.
a strong name. I have a daughter that's due in about a week, and her name's going to be Taylor.
Okay.
Aw.
Congrats.
Sweet.
Thank you. So I have a really busy year ahead of me. Several busy.
Yeah, you do.
You're living the life, man. That's the dream right there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very blessed.
All right, Justin. So when did you join and how old were you when you joined?
I think I was a little after 21 years old, and that was about, let me think. I think it was 2005. So it's been almost about 13, maybe 14 years.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize you'd been a Mason that long. Maybe I
Yeah.
did know that. I don't remember you talking about that before, but
Well, I
remember him
going through
saying like 10 years ago or something like that. So I was like, okay, so at least 10 years.
Yeah. I was going through some of my paperwork the other day, and it had my my initiation and my petition and all that. And yeah, it was around 2005 when I did everything.
sweet. So you got a taste of the end of when it was full of the gray hair.
Yeah.
When I joined in 2004, I mean, it was me and my brother, my cousin. We were all youngsters, but that was it. It was a huge chasm in between the next age group.
Yeah, I was by far the youngest member of my lodge at that time.
Yeah.
I consider myself pretty lucky in that I came in just late enough, that for a younger guy like me, like there was already a bunch of other younger guys who'd gone and trod ahead and kind of started to bridge that gap. But Justin, what inspired you to join?
I think I was just at a point where I was really wanting some kind of, for lack of a better word, I guess, some kind of fraternal bond with some fellow men. I'd been out of high school for a while, and I was just looking for another way to just reconnect with other men. And also I knew that my dad and my granddad were both Freemasons. So it just kind of made sense, to approach my dad about it. And, he got me a petition, and it just kind of went off from there.
Okay, so that's kind of what drew you specifically to your home lodge.
Yes.
Now you mentioned that you're a past master of two different lodges. Which one is the one that you joined?
Grandview.
Okay, Grandview.
Yes.
Is that the one your dad and grandpa were members of?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Sweet.
Oh, that's cool.
Is grandfather still alive?
He is actually, and
Wow.
I went to the Grandview installation last week, and I sat in lodge with both of them for the first time in ages, what it seemed like. So it was really nice to be able to do that again.
I'm
Yeah.
glad you were able to do that.
Yeah, very cool.
Can you tell us a little bit about Grandview Lodge?
Grandview, yeah,
it's a really interesting lodge. It's one of those lodges that used to meet in one of those 2-story buildings that
Okay.
were real prominent back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And they had several businesses downstairs, and they had a hotel. And then I think in the 60s, the whole place burned down. And so it's not really relevant to anything today, but it's just, I don't know. I really like the history behind that and everything. It's just what it could have been, as far as the building goes.
Yeah.
But when I first joined Grandview, like I said, I was one of the youngest men there, and unfortunately, you're talking about when I joined, it was kind of the end of the gray hair era, which unfortunately meant there was a lot of Masonic funerals that took place between now and then.
Yeah.
And so that's really hard. You see a lot of good men, move on. But Grandview changed a lot during the time I was there. At the time, the lodge room looked a whole lot. It almost looked like a warehouse. It was just a big square room with the linoleum floor, and me and some of the other brothers that joined after I got there, we all got together. We put a lot of work into that lodge. We went and got carpet. We carpeted it. We did the whole checker payment around the altar.
Sweet.
I mean, it's before. I actually looked for the before and after pictures, and I could not find them anymore. But it was a huge contrast between what it was and the way it looks now. We took a lot of pride in that building, and yeah, and so it's kind of hard to leave. I still consider it my mother lodge. I
Yeah.
still feel as though I'm a member, even though I've since transferred my membership and don't really attend there very much. And so it's just really hard when things that I guess that you worked really hard towards, what you remember there, kind of went to the wayside as you step away.
Yeah.
No, it's not uncommon.
No, it's not, unfortunately.
And now
Yeah.
you said Grandview is your mother lodge. Which one is your home lodge?
My home lodge now is Whitney 355.
Whitney 355. Okay,
Yes,
can you
sir.
tell us about Whitney?
Yeah, Whitney. Both these lodges are pretty rural, and they're both about the same population town. But Whitney is it's a really good lodge. I enjoy it. It's kind of there's definitely that age differentiation there. I'm probably the youngest guy there right now again,
Mhm.
and they have 2 lodges that met in the same building, which is really unusual, especially with a town this small. And unfortunately, what's probably going to end up happening is the second lodge that's meeting that building, they're looking at doing a merger with Whitney, just because it's really hard to support 2 lodges, when you have such a small population, I think.
Yeah. Well,
Absolutely.
all of us agree with consolidation. We think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Combine your efforts. It sucks we lose a lodge, but in the end, you guys are going to look better in the community working together.
Yeah. Basically, you have, because a lot of the members are dual members. And so you have these guys that are split 2 ways. They're supporting both lodges, doing all the work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Anadarko, I mean, it was really interesting in concept when they it wasn't actually chartered, they rechartered it. It was a lodge that only met one time locally, a long time ago. It was at a fort, and it demised, and so they brought it back, and it was going to be one of those kind of like Chalk Mountain, where you meet by lantern light and
Mhm.
and all that stuff. And
Yeah.
they did it once or twice, and they dropped it very fast, unfortunately. So there's nothing really to differentiate it from the lodge that's already there. And like I said, there was only maybe a handful of members that were actually raised in that lodge. Everyone else was a dual member with some other lodge. So it's just too much effort for a small population and a small group of core members to support both lodges.
Yeah, every once in a while I'll hear a story about a town where there's 4 lodges maybe, and and everybody is a member. Everybody, like, is a plural member. And I'm like, at that point, just have 1 lodge and double the dues. But
Absolutely.
so I wanted to kick off kind of our subject questions. I wanted to ask you, can you tell us the story of the gardening club?
Sure, man. I'd love to. So let me see where I want to start with it. So imagine there's a world with no Freemasonry. There's no such thing as a Masonic Lodge. But there is, however, a gardening club. and it's been around for several hundred years. It's very prestigious, and there's been several members of that gardening club that were pretty renowned. Isaac Newton was a master gardener, so I mean it's pretty illustrious. And it just so happens that there is a gardening club nearby, and you've always heard about it, and you've always wanted to be part of something bigger. So you get on Google and you look for the whatever the name of the local gardening club is, and you find a GeoCity website made in the 90s that tells you how to contact the actual club. So you do that, and in maybe a month or so, you hear back from the secretary, and they tell you just come on down, and we'll get to know you and all that. So you go down to the gardening club, and it's a it was probably a really nice building at one point. It looked as though whoever established it and built it cared a whole lot about it at the time. And so you go inside, and it hasn't been updated in about 30 or 40 years, but that's not a huge deal. It's just something you notice. And you meet all the guys, and they're really excited to see you. And before you leave, they've already given you a petition, and everybody that you've known for a whole 20 minutes is already signed and everything. So you finish that up and you turn it in. And next month they tell you that they voted on you, and you are elected to receive the degrees of the gardening club. And you get your date, so you go on in. And the way the degrees are set up is that every degree has a special meaning associated with it. It's meant to cultivate you, no pun intended, to become a better person through the lessons and the allegories associated with gardening. And so you get sorry, brain. So you get all set up, and you go through your first degree, and it's a really beautiful degree. And the people actually, they know it really well. They're very well practiced, which is wonderful. And the whole foundation of this degree is based on preparing the soil. And obviously, that's symbolic. It's about preparing you and all that. And so I'm sorry. You go through the degree, and after the degree, tell you that there's a certain amount of work that you have to do before you can advance to the next degree. And it involves catechism. So they assign you a mentor, and you meet with your mentor over the period of several months, and he teaches you all this memory work. And throughout the time that you're learning the questions and these answers, you might ask him a few questions, about the actual questions and answers, just kind of elaborate. And usually the answer is not satisfactory. It's usually involving, wait to your higher degree or something along those lines. So you decide to go and be patient, and you learn all the work, and you turn it in, and you are elected to receive the next degree, which involves actually planting the seeds. And so you go through that, and again, you're informed that you have questions and answers, which you are then taught and you learn. And again, when you ask questions, you don't really receive any satisfactory answers. And you begin to notice around this point that you're talking about preparing the soil, and you're talking about, planting seeds and everything, but none of this is actually going on, physically. No one is actually doing the work that they're talking about doing. And you're allowed to sit in the lodge meetings, but nothing like this is talked about during the lodge meetings either. And you think maybe it's just because I'm not the highest degree. Maybe they're just not giving all the information because there's lower degree people in the lodge or something. So you go ahead and do all that again, and you go through and you receive the last degree. And this involves reaping what you've sown. And again, there's questions and answers. And again, you turn that in, and you're told that you're a master gardener, and that's fantastic. That's wonderful. So when do we actually start gardening? And you're told, it's all symbolic. We don't actually, physically do any of that stuff, but you'll get out of this, experience what you put into it. But no one really tells you how to do that or anything, or what you put into it, as far as application wise. So you attend a few meetings, and you slowly begin to realize that this is really just kind of a service organization. There's actually no talk about guarding going on. There's no actual guarding taking place anywhere, nothing like that. And I mean, really, aside from the ritualistic opening and closing, there's nothing that differentiates that meeting from, say, like a Lions Club meeting or something. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but that's definitely not what you were seeking as far as your experience goes. So you skip a meeting and no one calls you or anything. And so, okay, well, that was really easy. So you skip another one. And before you know it, it becomes a few years. And the only time you ever hear from anybody is when it's time for your dues to come in. Until one day you get a letter, saying that due to lack of participation, your gardening club is going to have to close. And, that's, you just throw in the trash because, I mean, that's not really a surprise to you because, why would you join a gardening club where no one actually does any gardening at all?
That's the truth.
I was going to say that seems highly relatable.
Well, and something that's hit me as I get a little more seasoned in all this is that their masonry was different than we practiced. It still was a corner of masonry, but what that generation and what the generation coming in now are looking for are almost on the opposite end of the spectrums that masonry has to offer.
I agree completely.
And
the problem with that is that you have these gentlemen, and I don't fault them at all for it. Like you said, it was what they were looking for out of the Masonic experience.
You got it, yeah.
But when they've been holding down the fort for 20, 30 years because no one was joining at the time, you get kind of defensive when anyone wants to suggest something that is kind of in opposition to what you've been doing all along.
Oh,
and
yes.
I think that's a lot of the problem that we're experiencing.
It hands down is. I mean, because their experience, what they enjoyed out of masonry most, they think everybody else is going to enjoy that.
Absolutely.
And it's just not the case anymore where, I'm not saying the guys joining, because they were huge into charity in the 40s and 50s. I mean, they created Shrine Hospital, all that kind of stuff during that generational era. Mm-hmm. And the guys joining are still interested in that, but not as much as they are in the educational aspect of this fraternity.
Yeah, absolutely. I love doing charity. I love helping people out, but personally, I'd like to do it on a more individual level. Yeah. I feel like as though if we raise money from other people and then turn around and give it away in our name, that's kind of dishonest, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And that's not true charity. True charity is when you give someone something, you can actually fill the void. Like, man, I really could use that $100, but they needed it more than I did, kind of thing.
Yeah,
that's charity. But it just comes automatically out of your dues, or you just raise it, at a fish fry and try and give it away. You're worse off than you were. That has no impact on you.
I'm with you. The fundraising to give away money seems a little bit on the edge of not charity at all.
I'm fine with fundraising to give away money just because you can give away a lot more money than you normally would. Mm-hmm. What drives me nuts is fundraising to keep the doors open.
Oh God, yes.
But I'm actually talking about fundraisers. Shortly after becoming a master, or based off of the YouTube videos that I saw that where you were talking, shortly after you became a master mason, you left masonry for about 2 years, right? And you seemed disappointed with the content of stated meetings and that your lodge was just another service organization.
Yes.
Can you tell us more about that experience?
Sure. So this was my first lodge at Grandview, and in all fairness, they do have a very unfortunate, I guess you could say, situation in that their lodge, like I said, it was one of those 2-story lodges. So it's downtown. It's right in the middle of downtown. So you have a really small rural lodge that's paying really high fees for its electricity and everything. So it has a really high operating cost because of its location. I don't understand the specifics of that, but that's how it is. And so they have two options. They could raise their dues, or they can do a lot of fundraising. And everyone's always afraid, that if you raise dues, it's going to chase everybody off. So no one wants to do that. And so what we ended up doing was every time there was a stated meeting, that was really kind of the focus of our conversations, and that would be either an upcoming fundraiser, or we would discuss the fundraiser we just had. And literally as soon as you finish the fundraiser, you come back the next month and you're already talking about another one. And it's just, I remember it just made me sick to my stomach. I was like, can we stop talking about fundraising, please? But so it was during one of these fundraisers, and I was helping prepare it. I showed up the night before, we chopped brisket, and then I came the next morning, and we're loading water, we're getting the drinks ready and everything. And it just, I just had this epitome, and it just hit me like a slap in the face. It's like, we're just a service organization. And it struck me as so weird, because we have all this ritual and all these ceremonies and all this catechism, and it harkens back to something marvelous, something amazing. And then in practice, it was so mundane. And it just, I don't know, I don't really, I remember feeling that, and I just resolved to myself that I wouldn't be coming back after that. So I helped out the rest of the day, but that was it for me. And at the time, I would have been happy if it stayed that way.
Wow.
Now, you did come back eventually, and you mentioned that you found things online via Masons of Texas, which is now My Free Masonry. You read some books that you really liked. You talked with some, conversant brothers. What were some of the things that kind of, started scratching that itch and then eventually just sucked you back in?
Most of the things I read at the time were articles and things online. I was in college, so I didn't really have book money, but it was, you probably all know how that is.
Yeah.
But I actually did a post pretty recently. I listed some of these. Let me see if I can remember off the top of my head. There was Laudable Pursuit.
Yes.
There's another one called Back to the Future, which was pretty powerful to me. And I think Do's That Don't. Those are probably the three big ones. And it was, and I wasn't really familiar. I'm just going to go ahead and throw out traditional observance. I wasn't really familiar with the concept, but as I kept reading all these articles and everything, I found myself agreeing with a lot of things they were saying. And I don't remember how far I got into my research before I came across, the TO concept. But it was basically what all my research had been building up to. And I kind of, I don't know, I knew that Grandview Lodge would never become a traditional observance lodge, and that's fine. And not every lodge should be. I could elaborate on that in a minute if you want me to, because I have this whole philosophy about traditional observance, but I knew that there was a lot of concepts that were directly applicable to the concerns I had about the fraternity. And I really wanted to enjoy Freemasonry. I really wanted to love the fraternity, but it was this disconnect between what I felt we were supposed to be and what we were actually doing that sort of drove me away originally. And these concepts that I came across seemed like they could bridge that gap. And so I found myself really excited to get involved again. And that's really what drove me back to the lodge, drove me back to the fraternity, and eventually, years later, would sort of drive me to create my blog and later the vlog and everything else I've been doing.
No, the TO concept had a big push in my motivation as well.
Yeah.
When I first saw it, I thought, oh, that's what we're going to do with 148.
Well, when you look at like the textbook example of traditional observance, I think the appeal to that is, when you're not a member of the fraternity and you think about Freemasonry, that's what a lot of people think about, what TO is actually doing. And in contrast with people coming in the lodge in sweatpants and eating a hot dog.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very easy to see what the appeal is.
That's what I'm
Oh,
going
yeah.
to start doing. Sweatpants and hot dog consumption. I'm not even going to ask for hot dogs to be served. I'm just going to bring my own hot dogs.
Hey, the great thing about sweatpants is you can fit a whole lot of tater tots in your pocket, so you can snack throughout the whole lodge meeting.
Oh man, that'd be
That's
fantastic.
pretty solid.
That's
Hey,
Napoleon style.
So
Some of the shoes where you can see your toes. What are those? The Phantom feet.
I know exactly what you're talking about. The toe shoes or whatever the heck they are.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Justin, one of the things, we've been kind of touching on TO and all these concepts, and you mentioned a lot of different TO sources on your videos online, kind of in what brought you back. Is that really something that because you gravitated toward those ideas, is that something that you're still interested in, or that you're still trying to make actively happen at your lodge, or?
Well, I had kind of a thought a few weeks ago, and I'll go ahead and share it with you if it's okay. But I've been writing a lot and making a lot of videos about something called continuous improvement, and also best practice. And I think, well, I'm actually pretty confident this is what happened. Is you have these lodges that they're like, what is the absolute best practice for all of our concepts that we do in our lodge, and what came of that and the continuous refinement of that was the traditional observance experience, and even the European what was that, the European concept lodges
model.
yeah, before that also. And so, and they they slapped that label on the traditional observance, and so I think, yeah, I'm still a huge fan of it, but I don't think it looks the same for every lodge, because what may, you think of TO and you think of tuxedos and high dos and and fancy dinners, and I may agree with a lot of that, but that was what was best for that lodge. That was the best practice for that particular lodge, and so TO is the end result, or I say end result, but it's a continuous process. But it's the end result of looking for best practice and then refining that through continuous improvement. So you could slap a label on a lodge, but really TO is best practice. And what is best practice in like a lodge like my lodge may look very different than like St. Albert's in College Station. So, but the point is, you have to have that process, and so many lodges do not have that process. They don't have this process where they're looking at everything they're doing and saying, is this the best way we can do it? Is this the best Masonic experience we can provide for everybody?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the term best practices, because actually for a while now, I've been referring to Fort Worth Lodge as a best practices lodge, because people ask like, hey, aren't you guys TO? And I said, no, we're not really TO. Like, we're what I would like to call a best practices lodge. And now hearing you call it that, I go, yep, that's the term that we should be using, because you're not full-blown TO. But you're taking from that and you're going, this works, that doesn't. This works, that doesn't. Okay,
Unfortunately, I think traditional observance also has kind of this, I don't know, a lot of people just kind of frown on the concept.
Yeah, there's a bit of a stigma with it.
There is a stigma, but who would really frown upon a lodge that's best practice? We're just trying to provide the best practice for our members.
Oh, that's so Pete Norman. I had a conversation with him about this a long, long time ago, and that's something that he said, that because St. Albans Lodge, I don't know if you've heard of them, Justin.
Yeah.
But they're not a TO lodge, but they are, I think he used the words best practice lodge or something like that. It was a little more easy to swallow, because TO did come very, stignified. It had its own reputation.
And I'll tell you, I've actually visited St. Albans Lodge. And this was several years ago. And it just so happened I was in town where they're having it was a regular meeting. It wasn't one of their fancier ones. But I still consider that probably one of the best Masonic experiences I've ever had. Just that one night visiting that lodge. So they definitely have good stuff going on there. and it's just it's just a accumulation of what we've been talking about. Refining your best practice.
Yeah.
So, on the subject of continuous improvement, can you tell us more about the concept of the golden circle and the importance of what, how, why versus the more effective why, how, what?
I could try. I don't know if I can get that deep, but that was actually I think that was one of my first videos I made.
I think it was like your second or third video, yeah.
Yeah, it's been a while since I revisited that, but really, I really like the concept, but I feel like it ties in very closely with the whole point of having a mission statement and a vision. But really, if you just want to stick with that, if you don't have a why you're doing anything, then you're just kind of doing anything that sounds good at the time. But if your lodge, if someone wants to do this fundraiser and someone wants to do go do this or something else, and you're just being reactive to whatever the brothers are presenting, you're trying to be everything. And if you try to be everything, you can't succeed at everything, obviously. And so that's why you have to have a why. And that really ties in, like I was saying, with your mission statement. Why do we meet here? Why do you want to join this lodge? This is what we're about here. This is our why. This is our mission statement. And I'm kind of a firm believer that really, if you have 5 lodges in a town or something, even 2, like I'm talking about, I was talking about earlier, they shouldn't be cookie cutter images of each other. You can have a lodge that just appeals to those people that are just focused on the fraternal aspects. And honestly, you can even have a lodge that's just focused on the charity. But that needs to fall into your mission statement and your why and kind of the vision you have for that lodge. And people need to know when they join that lodge, this is what this lodge is about. So if I just want to, get to know all the brothers and have that, that fraternal experience, this is where you need to go. If I want to have more of the TO experience or the best practice experience, like we're talking about earlier, this is a lodge for you. But because I'm really big on, brother needs to determine if he's a good fit for that lodge, and that lodge needs to determine he's a good fit for them also.
Well, some of it comes down to Justin. It really sounds like the crux of it is you don't want to half butt anything, right?
Absolutely.
Like if you're going to do something, do it right.
Yes.
Rather than trying to spread yourself so thin that you do everything at 7 to 10% of your effort, and then everything sucks.
Yes.
Do one thing really, really well, and the people who like to do that one thing will show up, and then you'll have enough people to keep doing it well.
Well, it's like the jack of all trades situation. You could do a lot of things, but you won't necessarily do it all very well. And it's like you're saying, absolutely. If that's what those people are going to lodge for, they know that that's what they'll be doing when they go to that lodge. And I think that will help with retention and attraction.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah. And like you said, if you're going to do the same thing, if you're going to have 5 lodges in a town of 10,000, you may as well merge up.
Yeah.
See if you can get one thing right, and then go from there.
Yeah.
So let's say that I would like to bring, Fort Worth Lodge has a vision and mission statement, but let's say Fort Worth Lodge didn't have a vision and mission statement. How is that, how would I go about proposing that we do that? And then when we said, okay, let's do this vision and mission statement thing that you were talking about, how do we go about actually doing that?
Okay. And so what you initially want to do is you want to call a meeting. And like the way we did it at Whitney when I was the worship master, it wasn't like an official called meeting. We just I called everybody there, but we met in just the dining area. And it allowed us kind of more freedom for discussion and everything. So it wasn't like anything official. But what we did is, you just sit down with these brothers, and I just got like a dry erase board, and I had, everybody had a piece of paper, and I was like, write down, I think it was like the 3 most important things you think our lodge should be doing. And after everybody did that, we took like the top 2 or 3 that everybody had suggested, and that was just kind of what we determined was going to be the focus for that year. And as far as like creating a mission statement, you need to say, where do we want to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now? What's our long-term goal, and how can we obtain that? And that's just kind of, you don't have to actually, you're not going to put that timeline in your mission statement or anything, but this is how we're doing it. So like, oh geez, I'm trying to remember what it was, because unfortunately, when you're not in the East anymore, things kind of change sometimes. But making good men better through education and fellowship. I think it was something along those lines. And that was how we were going to reach that goal. And obviously, it wasn't the best mission statement. And the problem with mission statements is when you have a large group of men that aren't necessarily experienced with that kind of process, you might get kind of a rough draft of your mission statement. And ideally, what you would do is kind of refine that over time. And it's really important to have that refining process where you revisit it, at least once a year, where you say, this is our mission statement, this is what's important to us, and is this still accurate?
That's a good point. You maybe set a time every year that you reevaluate your mission and vision.
Yeah.
See if it needs any tweaking.
Yeah.
Because it is hard to nail that down, but it helps. You should do it. The mere process of doing it is such a bonding experience that
Absolutely.
just the experience of doing it, whether you come up with something successful or not, that meeting, it's good to do.
I find that you will learn things about your brothers that you might not have otherwise known about. You might be surprised what kind of things that they care the most about and things like that.
Somebody will surprise you, I guarantee you.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
Right, and I was about to ask that too, because it seems like that would be that's a good way to kind of do a self-internal assessment, and understand, am I really meeting what the majority of my members are looking for?
Yes. And the thing about, you mentioned the majority of the members, and I've wrote about this a few times, and I know a lot of people kind of probably don't like this part of the idea.
Oh.
But the thing is, you're not going to get the majority of your members to these meetings. I mean, you can't get the majority of your members to any meetings. What you're going to get are your core membership. Your these are the movers or shakers in your lodge, and they're the ones that actually are going to represent your majority. And it's not about forming like a clique or anything like that. It's basically what it comes down to is you're not a stakeholder. You never attend. You don't come. And if you want to be a part of that process, we invite you to be part of that process, but you need to come.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these decisions are being made with just, I call them the stakeholders because they're the ones that are always there. They put the work in. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people might feel like, you're trying to politic or form cliques or anything like that. And that's not the case. But if you wait on every member of your lodge to attend anything, you're never going to be able to make any important decisions.
No, I think you're spot on with that. That's just silly. I mean, because
if they care, they'll show up or they'll call you. I mean,
Absolutely. You might get an angry letter or a phone call, and then that's when you invite them to come to the next one. You're welcome to start coming to the lodge. You're welcome to come to our direction meeting. But if you want to be a part of that process, you need to show up, not just call angrily, reactively to the decisions we've made.
Oh man, I'm glad you care so much. We'll see you at the next meeting to discuss how you want to change that. All right, good deal. We'll see you there. Reminder: Tuesday at 5. Do you need me to text you the address? You have a cell phone. Hold on. All right, do you have a cell phone?
Well, and I think something that people should realize on this mission and vision is it's for members that haven't even petitioned yet, because once we established our mission and vision at Fort Worth, it became easier and easier for us to convey to candidates what we do and what our focus is. So we didn't raise guys expecting something at 148 that they weren't going to get. You know, we do charitable stuff for sure, but they know that's not our focus because it's not in our mission and vision. And so they know what they're getting, and they're going to work towards that.
Do you think that's helped with retention at your lodge?
That was a small part of it for sure.
Yeah.
The mission and vision, like I say, the activity and all that bonding experience was great, but it's the actual practice of that mission and vision that was crucial.
Yes.
And good food. Good food. You guys come back.
We stumbled a few times after we made those mission and vision statements, but have since kind of coagulated the idea. And to say it's helped retention is an understatement.
That's great.
Yeah. I mean, we've got EAs that have been EAs for 3 or 4 years, but they're still active. I mean, a fellowcraft showed up the other night. His whole process has been, I think, 6 years. He's still a fellowcraft, still active all the time.
That's great. And that, you know, I see, I've seen members that have been like fellowcrafts and EAs for a long times, and they feel kind of ashamed about it. But there's no shame in that. And I think that's great if you're a fellowcraft and still coming around.
No, JPL, Jewel P. Lightfoot Lodge. I don't know if you've ever met David Bendel, but you need to. He is a fantastic Mason.
Okay.
They encourage, you know, take that year, take more if you need. And I had a long discussion with him. It's like, you're right. Why are we scaring them with that time frame?
Yeah.
And of course, this year we made it a little harder, which is, I got my opinions on that, and they're too strong to voice right now. But, you know, it's just a little paperwork if they go past their year. No big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've worked with EAs and fellowcrafts and stuff. And my dad, you know, he teaches also. So he's worked with several people, and we've told them the same thing you're talking about. You know, we're going to spend time with you and be sure you really understand what you're doing. You know, so if that takes a year, then it takes a year. It's no big deal. And then you'll have older members that will overhear that, and they think you've gone crazy.
No, and that's the thing that David made me realize is that we put that time frame on for memorizing the words. And sure, you can do that in a year. You should be able to. But to actually understand what you just went through may take longer than a year.
Oh, I'll tell you, when I went through my degrees, I don't know the exact timeline, but it was between 4 to 6 months to do all 3 degrees. And basically, I memorized it long enough to repeat it. And then I just brain dumped it, you know, just forgot it, and then moved on to the next one. And I was no better a person when I took my EA than I was when I received my master's degree. You know, I was the same guy. You know, just the act of memorizing things, unless you internalize that, you're no better off.
No, you get a little bit of benefit, but not like it should. I mean, because it's not like we're memorizing pointless stuff. This is profoundly deep, you know.
Absolutely.
Each question and answer you could spend months digging into. So
I was going to say, kind of on that note, can you talk to us more about raising the bar on proficiencies?
Sure. I think here in Texas, we already have, I've heard about other jurisdictions. I hadn't had the pleasure of, you know, visiting any, but I know that we kind of have a high bar already as far as the amount of memory work that's required. I don't think we have a high bar necessarily always about the quality of the memory work that's turned in. And I would even suggest that I know that there are some lodges that require like some kind of a paper to be presented or something during, you know, before you can progress. And I think that's fair. I haven't experimented with that myself, but I know that writing about Freemasonry has benefited me a lot. You know, if not from the research, just experiences, you know, of actually writing and presenting things. And I don't think it's really a lot to ask. You know, write a page or two about what you learned in this degree, and share it.
No, I'm 100%. There needs to be more to than just memorizing. And we have went back and forth about paper. The thing about it is not everybody that joins can actually or has the confidence as an EA to put together a paper. So we've kind of pushed that into masterdom, you know. By that time, if you're not ready to write a paper, you're going to anyway, because we're going to teach you how at some point. You know, you screw up so much, you'll eventually learn it like I did.
Yeah.
But
Something
there's,
else. Oh, sorry.
yeah, there's so much more you could do if it's just sharing experience about how you used your 24-inch gauge and common gavel.
Mhm.
You know, something you could do, because you're going to have to be specific for most candidates. You just find their strengths, and as an EA, you pull those out.
Yeah,
And then as a master, we'll poke at your weaknesses.
absolutely.
You know, but I'm with you. It's got to be more than just memorizing, because that's the thing I've seen as I've visited lodges. You have some lodges that they have their candidates learn every word. I mean, it's almost perfect, but they do it in such a fast manner and proficient that there's not quite an understanding of what they just memorized. Exactly like you said. Then there's the brain dump, and you're no better for what you were when you began. Then there's some lodges that really don't teach the work at all. You know, the words, they're not as important, and they teach the meanings behind it, you know, and then there's some that don't do any of the above. Yeah. And there has to be a marriage of it all, because the memorization of it is important because you're going to utilize it the rest of your Masonic career. It pales in comparison to understanding what you're doing. There's no way you can self-improve if you don't internalize those lessons.
Yes.
And I've said this before, but given the choice, I would rather have a candidate give me the proficiency answers in plain English with, you know, totally expressed in their own words, as long as they understand it and care.
Yeah.
You know, instead of just parroting.
No.
Because, I mean, I'll be honest, and I'm not going to name names, but I have met brothers that I know have gone through the whole process, and it's not really on me to judge, but you can tell that they have internalized 0% of anything they learned. And so, you know, not only have they not benefited from the teachings, but the fraternity has suffered, because now, you know, they can take control of a lodge, they can be a leader, and we're at the end of the day, you know, we could be worse off for it if we're not careful.
No, you're absolutely right, because you get somebody in charge that's like, hey, let's just think of an idea to do my year, you know, to say I did that my year. And when there's no real focus, because there's no true understanding of what we're doing in there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we should be out in the community helping out and doing things here and there, but we make Masons. That's what our fraternity does.
Yes. And I think there's this misconception that everything Masonic you do in the community has to be done with a group of brothers with a square and compass on your back, you know, so everybody knows who you are and who's doing it. But if you look at even historically, a lot of the leaders in the communities, the movers and shakers, you know, the good people who everybody knew who they were Masons, and they were representing the fraternity through their individual actions.
Oh, and I'm telling you, especially millennials nowadays can smell a sales pitch from a mile away. As a realtor, I know it. And when they see a group of people out there with whatever organization they're a part of picking up stuff off the side of the road, that's a sales pitch to them.
Yeah, I know. It makes me cringe.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I'm like, hey, like this is super visible.
And
I'm immediately skeptical.
Yeah.
Well, and it
And
doesn't.
I kind of hate that because it makes me feel like, wow, like I am so cynical.
Well, and I think in the end, we all understand they're doing a good deed and everything, but they're doing it for a purpose, as opposed to you just stopped and helped some random person on the side of the road, and then somewhere, you know, help change a tire, and somewhere in the future they figure out you're a Mason. Mm-hmm. That's a lot different feeling than they're going to have than trying to be recruited by picking up trash on the side of the road with a bunch of square and compasses, you know?
Yeah.
Well, you talk about being cynical, but I don't think there has probably been many members that have joined because they heard, you know, join Freemasonry, look how many millions of dollars we give away per year to charity.
Not nowadays, no. Mm-mm.
Which, like you said, it's a great thing. It's wonderful. The Scottish Rite Hospital is phenomenal. Don't get me wrong, but like you said, I mean, if you're throwing a sales pitch, a sales pitch is the fastest way to turn away young people.
Yeah. And the thing about those charities, I mean, they're not necessarily self-sustaining, but they are close. Our forefathers built that.
Mhm.
So we can help maintain it for sure. But these new guys joining are looking to create their own mark in the history of Masonry.
Yes.
Like every generation has done.
Yes. We don't want to ride on their coattails.
You got it. Yeah. I mean, we can't etch our names in the side of the Scottish Rite Hospital now or the Shrine or hospital. We can support them, and that happens, and they love them. But they're coming for something different.
Well,
Yes.
and the young people running away from sales pitches. I mean, it's very true. Millennials are much like a house cat. Like if you kind of ignore them, like recognize that they're there, and then ignore them for about a half hour, and then let them come to you, you can get them. You know that's how you make friends in our generation. Like if you go up, you're like, "Hey, buddy, how you doing?"
I
Yeah,
feel
they're gonna run
almost
away. They're gonna go hide
like
in
I feel
their room.
almost personally attacked. This is so accurate.
I was actually just using our first encounter as an example, game.
Yeah, I mean, like it's pretty close.
Oh, and I love to hear all the excuses about why millennials aren't active because we have so many in our lodge that just gobble it up like bears. It's like if you give them a little bit of value, you cannot run them off after that. Once they figure out this is something valuable to them, it's game over.
I just want to tell you, like I said, my granddad's still alive, and I love hearing his stories because he's been a Freemason since like the 40s, and he'll talk about like when he first joined, and like obviously the community that I was talking about, Grandview, was really rural, and at the time it was way more focused on agriculture and things like that. And when it came time for lodge, the majority of people were there, or they told you, or you knew why they wouldn't be there. And you can't tell me that these men from this rural community who had something they needed to be doing every day of the year, didn't have distractions or things that could keep them from the fraternity, but it was important enough to them to be there. And treating us like we're house cats, we're distracted by every little thing, and we don't have the self-discipline to show up to something that's important to us. It's infuriating to me. I mean,
Yeah.
it's these older brethren making assumptions about what we want and telling us why we don't attend, and it's just totally being dismissive of a big problem.
I like your comparison of because you're right. I mean, those farmers back in the early days in 40s and earlier, they had something to do from sun up to sundown and 2 hours afterwards.
Yeah,
They
absolutely.
they were like busy to feed themselves and support themselves. And nowadays we're distracted. So in all honesty, it's going to be easier to create value to get those guys in as opposed to when you were pulling yourself off your actual livelihood.
Yes.
Well, and Justin, just for clarity's sake, I'm totally right in the middle of the millennial generation. I just like to make fun of the millennials because it's fun.
Yeah.
I can make fun of myself.
I think that carries over. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I actually had a question written down that was, should lodges bother trying to recruit millennial men, kind of knowing what the answer was, but like listeners, I just wanted you to take that question and then apply it to like the last 5 minutes of conversation, and then you'll have the answer to that. No. So one of the things I've been telling people, especially folks at our Scottish Rite, just because there's a lot of millennial type recruiting going on for a lot of the appendant bodies. And I don't mean this harmfully or anything like that, but y'all have noticed, right? The only people that are worrying about millennials becoming Freemasons and staying Freemasons are, generally speaking, not millennials at all. At least the people that are writing about it and publishing it.
And that hasn't changed for my generation. When I joined, the Xers were the next generation, and they were, how are we going to get them to join?
Yeah.
And it's been the same answer all the time because we got the same thing put on us. It just was minus Netflix, and
Minus
Facebook. Yeah,
Right.
it's some new dang cell phones. Can't get them off of it.
Yeah, there was less competition for our time. I would say in the late '90s, early 200 or early 2000s. So now I think we have to have even more of a value proposition that we present to prospective members.
Didn't you have like
Yeah.
a bunch of raves and grunge concerts to go to?
Hey, we won't talk about that. I don't even remember half those.
What happens in the '90s stays in the '90s.
So
Right.
Yes.
So
Did y'all
Justin,
have
what
did y'all
what
have
did
the
you,
Men in Black sunglasses? Just gonna ask because I totally had some Men in Black sunglasses. There.
I think I did.
No.
Yeah. Justin, what did you expect from your lodge experience as a millennial who was brand new to the fraternity?
Mentally, I kind of had this image I expected, but in practice, I don't know. I didn't know what I expected, but I knew what I didn't expect, if that makes sense. And there were, in hindsight, there were numerous things that I didn't expect that kind of threw me off. And that would be like the really artificially low dues, the state of the lodge itself, the dress, the the demeanor, and the kind of conversations that were taking place in the lodge and things like that. Those were things I didn't expect. Um, does that answer your question very well? I mean,
I think so. Yeah.
I could tell you more about what I didn't expect than what I actually anticipated, I guess.
No, I feel like that's totally fine because speaking in the negatives has a very good way of defining like negative knowledge defines positive knowledge in a way. There's a philosophical term for that, but I can't remember what it is. That does help a lot.
Okay.
So, what do you think that millennials as a general group are looking for in Masonry? I hear that deep sigh.
I think, this is my own philosophy, we live in a world where everything is mass produced and it comes cheap and easy, and everything that is cheap and abundant is easily discarded. And I think younger generations, and I'm also speaking from personal experience, we're I guess so. I guess that also answers your other question in hindsight, but we're looking for something that is not cheap and easy. We're looking for something that is not necessarily the new shiny thing in the market. We're looking for something that's old and stable, because you'll throw away your cell phone in a year or two. But Freemasonry will always be there. We're looking for something that isn't easily obtained. We don't want participation trophies, and we want something that will actually be deep and meaningful, something that we can do the rest of our lives and carry on that legacy to our children. We want, I really do believe that the millennials and, around that age group, they're very interested in, like you said, leaving their mark in building things. And it's not about being innovative or anything like that, but it is about, I guess exploring how best to do things in a lodge. And I think once we start meeting that resistance, my story is a prime example of that. Once we see that in many lodges that is not fertile ground for any of that, then that's when you have that walk away factor where they just leave. Because if you're going to tell me that it's none of those things that I signed up for, why am I going to stick around?
Yeah. Easy to pick up, easy to put down.
Absolutely.
And it's fun.
And it's, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's funny that, you have all these lodges and grand lodges that are so worried about membership numbers, and their reaction to trying to fix things is actually the opposite of what they should be doing. It's the low hanging fruit. What can we do to try to fix things? Well, let's just make everything easier. Make the proficiency easier, make it easier to join. Let's maybe 1 day classes. And that's really the opposite way we should be going.
Yeah.
I actually wanted to ask that. I have a question written down. Is what adaptations to Masonry do you, sorry, quote unquote adaptations do you see in Masonry as being the most dangerous?
Let me think. It's not a recent adaptation. I don't know that you'd even call it an adaptation, but it's been kind of almost like a de-evolution, and that is the West Gate. I know once upon a time, part of the reason, in my opinion, Freemasonry was prestigious is because it was hard to be associated with it. It was hard to be a member. And they were very careful about who they let join. And I think for very good reason. And today, like I gave my example of the gardening club, you can have a complete stranger walk into many lodges and say, he wants to join, and he will walk out with a petition full of signatures. I've seen it. And I know many of y'all probably have also. And you don't know anything about this guy's character. You don't know, how he'll get along. And I have seen that whole process play out where you get and this isn't just newcomers. I'm sorry. This is also existing members of other lodges. And anyone you let into your lodge, you need to really evaluate. And because especially in smaller lodges like I come from, I don't know how it is, like at Fort Worth and everything, but it only takes one or two toxic people to kill a lodge. And the thing is, unfortunately, these are the kinds of people that are also very quickly looking for a way to get to the east. And it isn't, I don't care if you've had 10 good, strong years, you put one of these toxic people in the east, you're done. It's all, the time's been wasted. It's totally gone.
Preach.
Justin, did you feel like singing in the choir today?
It's just that I've seen it, and I know many brothers in particular lodges, I won't name lodges obviously, put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to their lodges, only to have this Westgate process neglected. And it's just, I've seen lodges that were strong, barely able to meet, barely able to get enough people to show up now, just because of these few toxic people that are trying to run everything.
And we'd had our long-standing position process, whatever, of saying, we make the guys wait 6 months, whatever, then they can petition, and then they go through the degrees. And one of the things that we learned, I haven't been a Mason for very long, but it was within my time at the lodge, we had an experience that said, okay, well, we got to start vouching affiliations better too. And it was just one of those things where we had a bad experience, and so now we have investigative committees for affiliations, and even if we know the brother, we just say, hey, we know you, you're still going to have to wait a month.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's no longer, having a pulse is your only requirement.
Yeah. And I think we've been talking about there's I don't know if this is official, but there's been some talk about maybe going back to ballot box, not just show of hands, as well for affiliations as well. Because obviously it is required by law to do ballot box for new petitioners, but
that
for affiliation,
has always bothered me, and particularly when you're going to vote by show of hands with the guy sitting in the lodge room with you.
Yes.
How are you going to really guard that gate?
Because if you're going to be that guy, you're going to be that douchebag that stood up and voted against somebody, right?
Yeah.
Obviously it's your duty to.
And honestly, I think
everyone else is going to look at you and go, "Oh wow, he just did that."
But I think that may be at one time that may be why they made it so you can do that. So and the problem with practices like that is lodges typically fall back to the easiest practice.
Yep.
And that is the easiest practice. Everyone stays in there and everyone votes with their hands. And like you're saying, you don't want to be that guy that raises your hand. So now you get a new dues paying member in your lodge.
Yep.
But they don't do that with consideration of what that guy can do to your lodge if he's toxic.
No, you're absolutely right. And when we were talking earlier about millennials, the thing that struck me is one of the main things that helped our retention was making it harder for them to join.
Yeah.
You know, we took our petition process from 2 months to 8 to 10 now. You know, so it's
Yeah,
not
we're
just
making
an
it wait
overnight.
longer and longer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's funny is around that time, I saw that video that you made, Rhit, with Fred Milliken. Is about the time that at Whitney we started implementing at least a 6-month period.
Yeah.
Where you need to at least come and attend for 6 months. And
Man, we have an EA right now that the guy, he's another friend that's a brother at a separate lodge, and he said, they're making you wait. Come to my lodge, we'll get you signed up right now. And he said, I think I'm going to like it here better. And he stayed.
good.
And he's
Yeah.
super awesome.
He is.
He really is.
He's
He
eating
really
it up.
is.
Great.
So
Passion.
in terms of exclusivity and not just exclusivity, but one of the things that people say sometimes is, you know, raising dues is pretentious or that it's, you know, exclusive or whatever. You know, we've talked about this on the podcast before, that raising dues to cover expenses and to give us oh my gosh, I just had a total brain fart. Anyway, meaningful experiences that are worthwhile. There we go. It's not a bad thing, right? So our listeners are kind of familiar with that concept, but you actually had a formula for calculating what dues should be. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. And it's not foolproof, but what you need to do is kind of get like an average of your lodge expenses from, say, like the last 5 years. And take into account how many dues paying members you have. You obviously want to exclude your endowed members, and then just divide that number. You know, so divide your total operating cost, your average operating cost, with the average dues you receive every year. I'm sorry, not your average dues. Let me back up. You divide your average operating cost with your number of members you have, and then that should be what your dues are. And it's you know, because your dues need to cover at least your operating expense. And like was mentioned earlier, you know, anything extra you're going to do is great, but then you can fundraise. You could do fundraising for that if you want to, but you need to at least cover your butt as far as the lodge goes.
And I love the description. Somebody said, do you do the cruise line style dues or the pay as you go style dues? And you need to figure that out.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if you want to put the donation bucket out for meals, that's great. You know, if you don't, you got to figure that into your dues.
Yeah. And, you know, of course that will mean your dues go up even more.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, it's just one of those things you got to look at.
I'm all for all-inclusive cruise style dues. I think I may have gotten some things thrown at me the other day in lodge, and I suggested we go ahead and raise them again because it's much easier for me on a planning basis for the yearly family budget to just have a number. That's what I'm going to spend on masonry this year, and so I can take that number and I can just kind of put it down, and that's it. That's what I'm going to spend this year on masonry. So I love the idea of a high due structure where, okay, we want to hold an event. I don't have to go home, work it into the written budget. You know, if you have a budget meeting with your spouse, it's hard to explain. Yes, we did $365, and now we're going to do another $100. It's much easier to say, you know, it's going to be $500 a year.
Yeah.
Done.
And you know, like you throw out $500 a year, but you know, from like
it's cheap.
From a certain perspective, well, yeah. I mean, if you divide that by how many days are in the year, I mean, yeah. But if you divide most dues currently at most lodges by days in a year, and people complain about raising that, it's pretty sad.
Yeah.
But like if you pay $500 a year, I've always read that you don't really lose a lot of members when you raise dues. So I'm going to throw that out before I go any further. But you're going to have these brothers that are like, you know, I paid $500 a year. I probably should go ahead and go to the lodge.
Yeah.
And then you're also going to have the brothers like, well, I also went ahead and paid for dinner. So I definitely should go to the lodge because I'm paying these high dues and I've already bought dinner. I might as well show up.
Yeah. I don't have to put money in the jar this week because I paid my dues. So I'm going to show up and get my meal. Like, and you know,
Grant kind of alluded to it. The real trick is that if you have dues like that, there's a meal there you don't want to miss. It's like second Monday guaranteed you're going to have a good meal at 148.
Yeah,
Dude,
you're going to eat.
You're going to eat good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And that is it's a pull. But you have to make that decision, because I used to be on the train that dues need to go up across the board, and they do. I mean, some lodges have $50 dues, and I know that doesn't cover expenses.
No.
If it does, that's great. Your lodge, I don't think, will thrive with that kind of funds. You're going to be able to keep the doors open at best.
Yeah.
But you got to make those decisions, because our lodge, we decide, hey, we want to do a few events that are paid for. We do a family event and then a black tie event, and members don't have to pay for anything. They just show up. So they get value out of it. It's not just, hey, we're raising dues to pad the bank account.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the process where you really have to sell that, is when you're presenting, raising dues. It needs to be clear you're not raising them just for the sake of raising them. You need to be able to show this is how we're gonna bring value to the lodge with this extra money.
Yeah. No, I'm a member of the lodge that our average age at 148 dropped to like 56. And I'm a member of another lodge where it's like 76. So you got to be much more careful how much you raise dues with an average age that high as opposed to 54.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to swallow when the average age is lower. So there's a lot of factors you take into account, because if you just raise dues and the majority of members don't know, you're going to catch hell. I don't care if you raise them 50 cents. You got to do a campaign about it.
Yeah. And the whole fixed income thing, I mean, you just kind of hit on that. But, obviously, if you're retired, you're going to have a kind of a lower fixed income probably in most cases. But, the majority of people are on fixed income. And I'm not just talking about because the majority of your members are older. I work for a school district. I'm on a salary. I have a fixed income. Most people, unless you're able to get a lot of overtime or you do some kind of sales, you're on a fixed income. Everybody's on a fixed income.
Man, I tell you what, I made a comment to that effect in a discussion on Facebook, and somebody replied to me with, "You know what? It's not worth my time talking to you." I'm just like, oh, all right, whatever, man.
Well, and here's the thing too, is that, and I know I project myself being an old guy, and then dues go way up to where I can't afford them. It's going to be hard for me to say, yeah, I need help.
Yeah.
But that's part of our duty as Masons, because of the way it makes us feel.
And I know part of our push when we raise dues too. I mean, and we've talked about it a thousand times, was to make sure we raised it enough where if those guys needed help, we didn't have to hesitate to say yes. It was like, okay, yeah, we got this. This is built into what we're doing, and that. I thought that to be a great solution. Just make sure it's there. And,
everything that we're, one of the huge things we're taught is charity, and particularly charity towards each other. But we're too afraid to act on that and ask for help.
Yeah, and to let it be accepted, because when we did our calculations on our dues, we took everybody over 65 and kind of projected we're going to get $60 to $100 from these people, because that's normally what we get now when our dues were $100. And then said, okay, with all the rest of the dues paying members minus 50 year and endowed, what do we need for our budget? And that's where we came up with our $1 a day.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of variables. You really got to sit down and do your homework on it, because it's been so long since dues have been raised in most lodges. You got to do your homework. And if you present those facts to the brothers, more than likely they're going to listen to reason.
Yeah, I agree.
So, gentlemen, it's been a pretty good discussion, and we started off with the story of the garden. So I wanted to talk more about gardens. This week's Fraternal Quote is, "Our England is a garden, and such gardens are not made by singing, 'Oh, how beautiful,' and sitting in the shade, while better men than we go out and start their working lives, at grabbing weeds from gravel paths with broken dinner knives. And that was by Brother Rudyard Kipling, Secretary of the Lodge of Hope and Perseverance number 782, English Constitution in Lahore, India, now Pakistan, in his poem, The Glory of the Garden. So I thought it was very fitting because it talks about working hard.
I love that guy. That's one guy I need to read more of.
I'm in love with Kipling. It's just amazing stuff. But so, gentlemen, let's do closing thoughts real quick. We'll go Rhit, Grant, Billy, myself, and then we'll let Justin go for it.
So this conversation for me just motivates me to do what I do in Masonry. And I think that's the key here, that when guys coming to join, or even people on the fence about being active, see a Mason that's enjoying doing what he does in our fraternity, that stuff is contagious, so find your niche. Don't get sucked into that fundraiser, that you didn't want to do. Now you got a pocket full of raffle tickets to sell. Say no and do what you want to do, because that's how you're going to help your lodge.
Hey, it's good to hear our brother down just a little bit south of us singing the same song that we are over here, and I hope it continues to grow in Texas Freemasonry. The attitude that it's quality over quantity, it's value over dollars and cents, and that it's really about giving men a place to be men and providing something they can't find somewhere else. So glad to hear it, Justin. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
Yep. So, Justin, just like Grant said, thank you for coming on here. It's interesting because as you're talking, a lot of things, I think, you can't hear it, but we're each nodding, right? Like, yeah, we kind of had the same thoughts on a lot of it. You brought up some new things that I think are going to spur additional conversation, especially in our lodge. But I like your approach. I like the analogy of the garden. And you're right. It's something to think about. The value, the vision and mission statement, as you mentioned. I think that's perfect, right? That is something that more lodges should do. In determining, what their core values are and what they want to get out of it. So, again, thank you. And this has been a great episode.
And then I'd like to say one of the things that's kind of struck me about your story, Justin, is that you left the fraternity and that you came back. And that's kind of interesting to me because we've got so many guys that, they get involved and they see what's kind of going on and they go, oh, well, this isn't for me. And then they leave and that's it. But not only did you come back, but you went on to serve 2 different lodges as an officer, and you're still serving as an officer, and now you're contributing to the wider scope of Masonry through your work. And I think that speaks very optimistically for all those other brethren who are, kind of losing their passion, or it's not losing their passion, but the candle's not burning as bright as it was a couple years ago, right?
Yeah.
Hey, go find what you want to do. You don't have to show up to that meeting, but you should find something to do, and just go and be active in whatever way you want to be active.
Absolutely.
But yeah, if you have any closing thoughts, go ahead and leave them with us.
Sure. I just want to go ahead and tell y'all, thank you so much for inviting me to be on this podcast. I know Rhit invited me several months ago and I couldn't make it, but I have been excited to do this ever since we had that initial conversation. I really enjoyed listening to y'all, and I am very grateful that you gave me this opportunity. I also want to just go ahead and say that, I love the fraternity, but I feel as though we need to all step up our game as far as how we actually are practicing our Freemasonry, particularly with our lodges. um, older generations worked really hard and they built this magnificent fraternity, and they left us something wonderful, and it's in our hands now. And we can't just let it run on autopilot. We have to take the reins, and we have to actually, direct where it's going. Because if we don't direct where it's going, it's just gonna let entropy kick in, and over time, it's going to not be what it should be anymore. And I know we're closing, but I just want to go ahead and tell everybody, follow the process. The process I laid out isn't anything unique. It's something that most organizations do, but as far as I know, most lodges and grand lodges don't always do that. And that is, create a vision and a mission, share it with everybody, and align everything you do with that. And it needs to be a consistent vision and mission over numerous people in the East that you can work for a long term. There's no point in making long term goals if you're going to change your direction every year, and it'll look different for every lodge. Like what? Crap! I just had a brain fart myself again. So the process laid out is for ideal organizations, ideal lodges, and there is no such thing. There's no such thing as an ideal lodge, or there never will be. So you need to look at that process and adapt it to your lodge the best you can, and try to make it work the best you can. I know, probably because I talk about Masonic Improvement a lot. I talk about improving your culture. I talk about building mission statements and all these things that I must have a perfect lodge myself, and I don't. It's a normal country lodge, and we do our work to improve ourselves, but it's a process that takes time. Don't expect anything to happen overnight, unless you just charter, a lodge with that intention. So follow the process. I mean, it does have value. It does work, and if you're really intentional about trying to improve your lodge, I feel like that's a great framework to start with.
Agreed. Justin, where do guys find you on YouTube?
You can find me just under Masonic Improvement on YouTube.
Sweet.
Awesome. And brethren, if you'd like to get into contact with us, our website is www.fortworth148.org. We are at Fort Worth Lodge 148 on Facebook. Our email is info148@fortworth148.org. If you live in the 64th District of the Grand Lodge of Texas and you want to promote an event, please reach out to them at 64th.org. That's 64th.org. If you want to learn more about our upcoming event, Texas Masonicon, reach out to us at www.texasmasonicon.com. That's spelled Texas Mason Icon. We are at Texas Masonicon on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. It's on September 15th, and you can pre-order tickets for $45 until August 15th when they go for the door price of $55. Vendors can contact us via Facebook or email to set up tables if they'd like. And that's pretty much all I got.
Got my ticket last week.
I should probably go ahead and buy one, shouldn't I?
Yeah.
Hey, all right, cool. Well, gentlemen, thank you again for a good call tonight.
Yeah, it's been a blast, Justin. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
Let's close this bad boy down then. This is Rhit Moore signing off.
Grant Gates signing off.
This is Billy Hamilton signing off.
This is Gabe Jagush signing off.
This is Justin Jones with Masonic Improvement signing off.